Afternoon, Tim. How you doing?
Hello, Sheba. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm very good, very excited. This is Monday the 10th.
10th. Yeah.
I fly out on Friday
Mm-hmm.
to the Himalayas. So
Mm-hmm.
very excited. Started packing and putting things away and getting all the bits and pieces that I need. So yeah,
Very
acting
good.
acting on a life path endeavor, which is
Always
always
good.
always good. But this week we are turning our attention to some lovely listeners' questions we put out, I think about a month ago, through your newsletter and on
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn and a few other channels, inviting our loyal followers to write in with some money and life questions, based on maybe what they've heard in the episodes to date or any other sort of money and life little conundrums or thoughts, reflections that they might have. And we've had quite a good response. So today's episode is going to be diving into those. So
Yeah.
are you ready for?
I'm ready. Just to say to listeners, other than just sort of downloading the questions, Sheba and I haven't discussed them. We haven't planned them. I think we're just going to do the order that they've come in, aren't we?
Pretty much.
So we'll only really know what the main themes are afterwards. But hopefully, certainly having looked at them briefly, they seem fairly representative of some really, really good and quite typical money and life questions. So we'll give it a go, see what happens, and let us know what you think, because this is something, if it's useful, we'd love to do more of, I think.
Yeah. And also what I'm going to try and do a little bit off the cuff is if there's an episode that we've talked about the particular theme, I'm going to try and do my best to signpost back to that episode using my memory bank and Spotify, which I have opened in front of me. So
Yeah.
I will try my best to do that, because I think it would be good to be able to refer back to those episodes so people can listen. Okay, let's crack on.
Okay.
So first question from Sabine is, how do we reconcile acceptance, the peace of living well with enough, without the lingering hunger for more? Good question. Nice one to kick us off.
So how do we kind of balance the peace of acceptance, i.e. what we do have, and enoughness, without the lingering hunger for more? It's a lovely
Pursuit.
question. It sounds like that's from someone I do know. I think I do know the person. It sounds like someone who's either got the good fortune to already be quite strongly connected with the idea of enough, not having to be wildly materialistic, or not too much bought into the idea, which we've discussed in a lot of podcasts, that somehow with more money I get more this, more power, more success, more status. So it sounds like they're well on their path, and indeed that they've been doing some money work, which is great. So on the one hand, people more become content that maybe it's not all in the number, and maybe the things I'm looking for, whatever that is, freedom, success, excitement, power, etc., are not in the number. And that often does lead, when we really get that, and that often does lead to a bit more peace. And I wouldn't just say acceptance of whatever my situation is, but maybe contentment and a real feeling that I have enough, whatever my money number. But then her question's great, but then you still have, what was it, the gnawing hunger for more.
Yeah.
It's a great
Do you think she's
question.
referring to, I'm assuming, more money? It could be, don't
Well,
know.
that's interesting. Say more. I think that's a really good point.
So just immediately I thought, the lingering hunger for more, it could be more money, could be more freedom, more, there could be a whole thing. I think she's probably alluding to sort of like more as in money, material, potentially is where, because living well with enough just kind of marries up with that. But I feel like that's just almost like a common human trait, the thirst or hunger for more, the pursuit of more.
Well, let's dive in. I think your point's really an excellent one, because it may be that in the question she doesn't know, or it's a bit of both. Because one of the things we've said repeatedly on this podcast is all of us unconsciously tie up our relation to money and money numbers, quantities of money, with our experience of qualities of being alive.
Mm.
So when I say I want more, it's quite interesting. I might think I want more money, but usually there's something I think I'll get with more money
Yeah.
that's a human experience. So when I say, do I want more? And I think we're not just being pedantic around the question, we're pointing to something we all do. Is it? Maybe it is. I want more money. I want a bit more being able to buy nice stuff, a bit more comfort paying my bills. Or in the more is that I want more life and more experience and more fun, etc., or more freedom. So the first thing, Sabina, I'd say is think about Shaba's question, which is excellent. What is it you really want more of? Is it money? Is it life? Is it both? Actually, the first thing is to say well done on whatever work you've done, feeling more and more peaceful and content with what you do have. The second is really be curious. What is it you really want more of? And all of us on this human journey who find ourselves often wanting more, to stop and go, what is it I really want more of? Is it an experience? Is it a sense of myself? Is it something I feel I'm lacking? Is it money? To tune into that. And as we've explored lots on the podcast, often, and we have this phrase, we're not stupid about money. We're not saying with more money you can't buy longer holiday or posher furniture or eat in different restaurants. But what is the more we're really looking for? I'm going to pause there. I think there's one more thing I'd answer that question with, but any more thoughts for you about what more? Does it bring up stuff you talk with clients about or other things we've discussed?
I think that this concept of enough is something that comes up quite a
Mm,
lot in my swing work, which
mm,
is the how much is enough. And
mm,
we always base it primarily on, okay, how much lifestyle,
mm,
i.e., and when we say lifestyle, that can be for material or immaterial stuff, right? It could be for the experiences, it could be for the gifting, it could be for whatever it is. But helping people to actually come to a conclusion as to how much is enough for them,
mm,
I think is a really good starting point. Because a lot of good stuff can come from having an element of clarity. And obviously it can
mm,
change as circumstances change, but just
mm,
being grounded in how much is enough from a planning perspective, it allows you to at least start to move towards a path of contentment. I think when you know, okay, well, for me, this is enough. And you can start to work towards accumulating enough and not going maybe above and beyond
mm,
and the pursuit and the like the unconscious sort of grabbing,
mm.
which a lot of people fall into because it just feels like, all right, I've just got to grab as much as possible. But I think enough helps to frame that. So yeah, that was the only thing that I was going to say.
I think it's great because there's what you're saying from your line of work is it does make sense to do some practical numbers based consideration of what do I need and what's enough. And I get that. And I think what you're saying, Shaba, is if someone does that work and I think it's a big and, they manage to stay focused on it, then when they get that number, they feel enough. They don't have to carry on with the hamster wheel or the race.
Yeah.
The danger, and I can see from your smile you've already seen it, the danger is if I do all that planning, which is fine, and that sort of consideration, but I still think the thing I really need and want now or in my future is in the money, I might set up something where without realizing it, I'm always chasing the money. And then what happens, and I think this is quite common, even when I reach the number that I sat down with my partner or my financial advisor and said, with this number, we'll be okay. Very often then people they don't feel okay because they don't feel enough, because enough in the end is a internal feeling. So I would say do the work, do the planning, but also work on the inner aspect of, and it's a big thing, feeling enough,
Mm,
feeling who I am, not just what I have, who I am, what my life is enough. That's quite profound. But if I can get there, I start to feel genuinely more peaceful and content with my life, regardless of the number. There's one more step I'd encourage Sabina or anyone with that question to take. But again, let me pause when we're talking about outer enoughness and then an inner feeling of being enough as a person, or one's life is enough.
Yeah, I was just going to say, but based on what you just said, I think I can't remember now which episode, but as human beings and the marvels that we are, I think we had that sort of episode where we were talking about our I can't remember exactly what it was, but we already are enough. Like
Mm,
as in like the human being is a marvel,
mm.
and I think it was comparing the infinite power and glory of a human being, and also it's
Yeah,
the opposite.
it was when we were actually talking about setting fees, because often people think their fees they set are connected with feelings of worth.
Right.
And if I have
Yes.
a low sense of worth, I undercharge or overcharge for different reasons. And I used a quote of a Jewish philosopher whose name it was Martin Buber, but he was telling the story of a famous rabbi. And basically, the rabbi had two pieces of paper, and one said, I am of infinite worth. The universe was created for me. And the other was saying, I'm a worthless speck of dust.
That's it. Episode
And
27.
there we go. Well done. We got it. The point being with enoughness is at a deep level. And we have to get there not just through intellect, but through body and a real experience. We can experience both of those things, that we are more than enough, perfect. We're everything we could ever wish for. We just don't tend to see it. And also we are worthless little speck.
Mm.
And until we kind of get those sorts of feelings, of many of us fighting to prove to ourselves and others that we are enough, we have enough. It's
I was just going to add, so in terms of the reconciling,
mm,
does it have to be reconciled, or can you just live with the fact that I've got enough, as in, and let's just think of it as like money to sustain myself and
mhm,
provide the things that I would like,
mhm.
and still honor and acknowledge that I'm greedy and I want more.
Brilliant. Well, this is the next step. So that's great. Because true enoughness, truly feeling enough, means I can include my greed and my voracious appetite. So if you read Sabina's question, there was something about, how do I deal with or get rid of my lingering hunger for more? Something like
Yeah.
this. So when I hear that, what I'm hearing is a great question. I want contentment. But what I hear is, I've got this lingering hunger for more, brackets, and I wish I didn't. It's a problem. If I didn't have my lingering hunger, I would be more content. So what I'm hearing is, she's a little bit against, she's doing all this work on her enoughness, which is great, but she's against her lingering hunger. And anytime I notice something I'm against or don't like, whether it's in me or within others around money or having, I might claim it. I might identify it with it. So exactly as you said, Shaba, I would say to Sabina, well, what is someone who always has a lingering hunger for more, right?
Yeah.
They might be partly content. They might have done a lot of work, but I'm always hungry for more. And maybe they're greedy or hungry or famished or voracious. So, what I would encourage Sabina to do, as well as work with her contentment and her enoughness, is to really honor and integrate, I am ravenous and it's okay. I am hungry for more and it's okay. And to really acknowledge that part, that might be part of her nature or her spirit. The key here is, it doesn't have to be tied up into money. Maybe she's ravenous for connecting with the world, or being more and more intensely engaged with, could be her street or the park or anything. The mistake would be to think, I'm always hungry for more and I think it's money, and then I don't earn lots of money, so then I feel a bit bad, but then I feel guilt. Then I get in a pickle.
Mm.
But if I can get in my identity, on the one hand, I am content, I am enough with and without money, right? Because I really feel myself, my own contentment and enoughness. But as you say, or you're implying, part of my contentment is, I'm even content with my ravenous hunger. So the other thing I might say is, I'm always hungry and it's okay. And my guess is, and Sabina, if you're listening, when you listen, please let us know. My guess is, if I can really get, I am content with lots of money, with not much money, etc. That's super. And I'm always hungry and it's okay. Or I'm always hungry, and that's beautiful. I could imagine that might really support a way of being that was endlessly curious and wanting to engage and explore the world. And how would I do that with whatever money I have? So let
Perfect.
us know, Sabina. What do you think of that, Shaba?
Perfect. I
Great.
like
Let
it.
us know. Thank you for your question, Sabina.
Right.
And we'll move on.
Move on to the next question, which didn't have a name attached to it. So this is a maybe anonymous. I'm not sure, but I'll read it out.
Mhm.
The other week, it was mentioned that the fear of running out of money felt like life or death.
Mm.
Tim followed this up with the point that this fear arises from our attachment to the physical side of life. Can you please expand on this point? How can people, in brackets me, begin to see beyond that and overcome such a deep fear?
Gosh.
That's quite a
I
deep
think
question.
this is from a gentleman called Joe. So it's my fault it didn't have a name when I pasted it into our little list. I think this is from Joe. Joe, thank you for your question.
Do you know?
Well, Joe, I think it's a very profound question. I think I can add something that's not the same as answering the question. For people who didn't hear that episode, yeah, we were talking about how scary it is, the thought of running out of money, which is very different from the experience of running out of money. And we were saying that many, many people, even with no good reason, even if they have lots of money, even if there's very little chance they're going to lose their job by doing this, that, or the other, they quickly get this scenario about, oh, well, if I do this or this happens, I'll be under a bridge, homeless, no food, starving. And what I was saying, and it's very important to say, this is all in the mind, because my fear about that in that moment for most people is not related to the actual situation. That's not to say some people are very vulnerable and a very vulnerable state and homeless with no money, and they may have certain fears and absolute practical challenges. We were talking about what's going on when someone for whom that's not their situation realize how terrified they are of running out of money. And I think from there, I said, well, actually, what humans have is a deep unconscious terror of not existing, of death, of the fact that we are all vulnerable. Either you or I, anyone, we could just be snuffed out today. And there's no getting away from that. You can't get away from it. It's true, right? And because humans, and Freud talked about this, and many religious systems talk about this, because it's profoundly uncomfortable for me as I go about my day with my identity and my routines and my responsibilities and my house to think, yeah, I might have a heart attack in 2 minutes and be gone. That's very uncomfortable. What do I do with that fear? One thing I often do, rather than just experience that fear or sit with it or gently open up to my kind of visceral terror that's just buzzing away below the surface, I tie it up with money. And I think, well, with money, I'm fine. And if I ever lost my money, it would be like death. So I think that's what Joe
Mm.
is mentioning. I can try and respond, but before I do, Shabbat, anything that I have another step or two I could offer Joe. It's a big question. Before I do that, Shabba, just any thoughts for you on this question of money and death and this sort of existential terror that I'm suggesting is bubbling away somewhere out of our consciousness?
Yeah, for me, I think that this statement about money feeling like life or death actually was in the episode when we were talking about why does money feel so heavy,
Mm.
and I made a statement about money being life or death, and I've never really dug it any deeper, and it's just something that I've thrown around. So I'm interested to hear the steps pan out
Mm.
myself. So I'm going to defer back to you, Tim.
Well, I'm going to tell a story. Since we're doing an unusual episode and we're doing questions, I'm going to tell one of my favorite stories. So, regular listeners will know I've been a Buddhist meditator for 30 years. And Buddhists talk a lot about impermanence and death, not because they're miserable, but actually because they would say really engaging with the sort of fragility and ever changing nature of life and the world in the end becomes very freeing and very beautiful and very tender. But most people go, oh no, they just always talk about death. They must be miserable. This is my answer to Joe's question. The story I want to tell is from the Zen tradition. That's not my tradition, but I appreciate a lot from the Zen. It's the Japanese Buddhist tradition. And the story is that one day a Western student, who was a very developed student, had been meditating for a while. And in Buddhism, there are various meditations you do on change and impermanence and letting go and death. And he was a big American guy. And he went up to his teacher quite proudly. And his teacher was this little Japanese old guy. And the big American guy went up to his teacher and said, "Master," he said, "I've been on this retreat. I think I really have overcome my fear of death." And the teacher smiled and then started laughing. And then, I should say at this point, Zen masters are known for doing quite crazy, spontaneous, unpredictable things. This teacher, while laughing and looking at a student, reached out and put his hands around his neck and started strangling him. And this student was rather shocked and realized he's really, this isn't a joke. He's really going for this. He's strangling me. He's trying to kill me. All the time, this little Zen master who's strangling his student is looking there laughing as if it's the most hilarious thing. And he's not joking. He's doing it. And this big American guy is kind of like, he can't breathe. He realizes he has to do something while this Japanese master is laughing in his face, strangling him. And he does, at one point, the only thing he can do, which he just swings and punches his teacher in the head and knocks him flying, all the while the teacher just lies on the floor laughing. And that's the story. And the meaning I take from that story is, Joe, we don't get rid of that deep terror. We don't get rid of it. And even someone who'd done a lifetime of meditating on death, who may have had some experience of freedom or letting go, the moment he proudly claimed, "Yes, I'm past that fear," to his teacher thought it was so funny. He just thought, well, let's see what happens when you think you're dying. And in that moment, we got the truth, which is we don't want to. It's scary. Now, I'm not saying that's the end of it, of course. But Joe, what I would say is maybe for us mere mortals, the practice is this: it's not to overcome or get beyond that deep visceral fear. Maybe it's just to be more and more open and actually kind of inviting of the experience. Remember, in this work, we talk a lot about the actual experience in the moment of whether it's something we like, power, fun, joy. What does that actually feel like to have that in the moment? And similarly, uncomfortable feelings, in this case, fear or vulnerability or fragility. The problem is we tie it up with money. So we think, with money, I have the feeling of power. With money, I get this experience of joy and fun. We're saying, no, 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 pay attention to the actual feeling. Well, it would be the same thing if I think with money, I'm somehow invulnerable or protected, or I'm not going to be fragile, etc. The thing to do, rather than try and get beyond the feeling of fragility or vulnerability or the fear of what happens if I am vulnerable, the step, Joe, is to actually, in terms of the work we just say, I am afraid and it's okay. I'm anxious and it's okay. Or I'm fragile and it's okay. And then we can open more to the feelings. We've talked about this reclamation, these funny statements a few times on the podcast, just to remind listeners, they're not belief statements. We're not mentally reprogramming. We're not doing affirmations. And there are episodes earlier where we go into it more. It's a bit strange, but it's rather we use these phrases to actually contact the feeling itself. So yes, I hope that makes sense. And I'm interested in what you think, Shaba. But what I say to Joe is, let's not try and get beyond that feeling. Rather, can I open to it and know it to be absolutely fine to have that edginess, that insecurity, that anxiety. And maybe there's a paradox in there, which is the more I can surrender and open to the experience, that might actually change the way I go through life, and I might be less driven by my fear. And if my fear had been leading me to try and think I have to compile money or protect myself materially, maybe I'm less compelled to do that. That was a deep question, Joe. So I've
There's,
given you a deep answer, but I hope you
I,
like the story. What do you think, Sheba?
I like the story, and I'm going to move straight on to the next question because
Okay,
it ties in and
great.
also asks you to expand and maybe take a step on how do you break the connection of the running out of money and the fear. So I'm going
Mm,
to dive into it. So Sheila's asked, I have a wonderful flow with money in the last
mm,
few years. That's great.
mm,
I still hold a concern that it will dry up. So that's that running out of money thing popping up again. How can I let go of that fear? Which is what I was going to sort of ask about the Joe question was, okay, that's fair enough. Like we've got that fear on an existential level, but how do we break the association with, money and
mm,
that fear?
mm.
Sheila's asked that question. So what are your
Well,
thoughts?
yeah, I'll go back to Joe briefly, and then
Mm,
we'll talk about Sheila. The way we break the association is we experience the feeling, we have the experience that we think we can protect ourselves from with enough money. So if I think with money, I won't be vulnerable, uncertain, fragile, or afraid, then what I'm doing is I'm kind of projecting onto money. It's like a protection against having that experience.
right.
Yeah. And then either when I start to lose money or think I lose money, it's like, oh my God, it feels overwhelming because suddenly I think I'm going to be in touch with all those experiences. Right. Or I just spend my life trying to get more money to try and protect myself from those experiences. So the way we do it is we separate our idea about money from the actual experience. But what that requires is what in some traditions they call a little bit of conscious suffering. I have to be prepared to experience my human fragility, fear, etc. Because it's nothing to do with money and it's there, it's part of my life. It's just whether I choose to see it or open to it. So it's a little bit paradoxical, but does that answer? Does that takes us further
Yeah.
with Joe? Sheila's very, very interesting. I mean, again, wonderful. Sheila's had flow with money, but what did you say? I'm still worried it might dry up.
Yeah. And how can I let go of the fear?
Yeah, yeah. Well, what I hear there is there's two levels to what Sheila's saying. The first, as you pointed out, Sheba, is I don't like the fear. How do I let go of the fear? And we don't like fear. Right? I don't like fear. But if I'm afraid of anything, I can dive into what's the actual thing I'm afraid of, and we could do some work there. But the umbrella, the sort of meta level is how do I let go of that fear? So rather like Sabina earlier in the episode, I don't like the fact I'm always hungry. A bit of me might say, I am always hungry and it's okay. And I might really see something from that part of me. And just like with Joe, we're saying, well, on some level, you're never going to really get away from the fear. It's how you hold it. Can you hold it with space or does it get to drive you? Sheila, we might say one step would be, yeah, honor the fear. Even though things are going well now, I still have this fear. It reminds me, and we've talked about this on the podcast, and you'll have them as clients, people who are retiring and they've saved and their financial advisor says, you've got enough money, you're fine, it's all going to be okay. But they still have the fear. And often, unless they do that inner work, they don't spend, they don't enjoy their retirement. I think I've shared this story with some person who came to a workshop who had been, I think they were on their sixth or seventh financial advisor. And every financial advisor had said to them, and it was lucky for them in their situation, you really got enough money. You don't have to worry. You can live till you're 90, 100, you'll be okay. But they didn't feel okay. They felt insecure and afraid. So one step, this isn't quite Sheila's question, is rather than fight my fear, I might actually think, I'm terrified and it's okay. And that can be very powerful. Sometimes we have ancestral fear. It's not unusual. I've talked on the podcast, I think, that I'm Jewish and my ancestors came to this country when they were kind of hounded out, really, and chased away from countries where they were being persecuted in Eastern Europe round about the turn of the 19th century. And it's very likely, and I think they were probably quite poor already, but it's certainly like they were refugees who arrived with no money. So there was a real insecurity there. And the reason I share that is because often there are reasons why we have fear. They just might be historical or old or tied up with parts of our personality, but they need to be honored. I think sometimes in modern psychology, like popular psychology or new age, we think you should never be afraid, or you need to be the warrior, or you need to be, and it's kind of bullshit, really. You need to honor your fear, but also not be driven by your fear. So I'm going to talk about something else that Sheila has said, but just on that general topic of how do we work with fear around money and things you see in your clients. Where does it take you, Shaba?
Well, I mean, that's a story that you mentioned around the 6 or 7 financial advisors, and I
Mm,
can imagine clients that I've sat down with who, again, no matter what you present in front of them, still have that fear that, because internally they just don't believe that they're going to be okay, and that leads to a whole host of further problems potentially around not being
mm,
able to just live life to its fullest. So I'm well aware of that, and so being able to sort of reconcile that, or come to terms with that, I think is so important. But coming back to this question,
mm,
where Sheila
mm,
says, well, I still hold a concern that it will dry up.
mm,
There's part of me that's thinking, not provocatively,
mm,
but again, honoring, well, what happens if it does dry up? Or
mm,
maybe it could dry up. I mean,
mm.
we don't know. And for all the charts and graphs and bit, we don't know what happens to the financial system, down the line, and,
No,
the world that we're living in. Now, we do our best endeavors to plan and be smart with our investing and this and that and all of that stuff. Is there a part that just needs to embrace the fact that it could all go tits up one day, and
right.
being comfortable with that? I mean, that is scary, but
Mm.
there's always a chance, right?
Let's talk about that. I think there's a number of steps. So on one level, the theme I think of this podcast with all the questions has been about relating to deep fear. So excuse me, yeah, work might dry up, we may lose money, all of these things. And just because I can say it with a calm voice, it doesn't mean that it wouldn't be scary for me, and it doesn't mean that I'm underestimating the impact of people. But on some level, we've talked a lot about what is our relationship to fear, what is our relationship to the experience of fear, and how do we start to actually have and own the experience of fear rather than thinking money protects us. And I think that can help. I think there's also something about, well, for Sheila, I can see two levels really. One is, and I wouldn't be able to get into this without maybe knowing more about her, but the question I might ask myself, Sheila, is, okay, if my work did dry up, if it did dry up, what would that mean? Where would that take me? So yeah, there's fear, but people fear different things. She might think, well, don't know. It would maybe mean I couldn't buy nice things, or I couldn't go on holiday, or I couldn't feed myself, or it's like, what's the thing you're worried about if your work did dry up, or I wouldn't be successful, or I wouldn't have status, or it could be many, many things, or I'd have done something wrong. So when we have a fear around money drying up or work drying up or losing money, it can be very helpful to go from the presenting issue. And then at the bottom, there's existential terror, which, as we said to Joe, we don't get away from that. But in the middle, there's what's the particular thing it would mean to me if my work dried up? And then we can dive into that. And Sheila, if you want to have a think about that and email me, you could let me know where you get on. That's what we call detective work. And then we can do that piece of work. I want to offer one more observation with Sheila's language, and I have no idea if this is helpful, but let me know. I was very struck in her language. She said, what did she say? My work is in flow, or money is flowing?
No, so she said, I have a wonderful flow with money in the
Yes.
last few years.
Yes.
So I have a wonderful, I mean, I guess that for me, I'm understanding that
Mm.
money comes in and money goes
Yeah.
out and it
Yeah.
flows, and
Yeah. Great.
there's no blockages. So
No, but it might dry up. So the image to me is a very water metaphor. It's flowing, well, liquid flows and liquid dries up. So without knowing Sheila's situation at all, and without knowing, one question is, what is the thing you'd worry about if it did dry up? I might be really even more simple and direct, Sheila. You could try this. I really hear something about kind of liquid or water, or what we might say in some systems, the water element. What Sheila's saying is flow is good and dry up is bad, right? And people listen go, well, yeah, of course, Tim, because flow means she's got money and dry up means she hasn't. So we're talking about money. But I'm listening, I'm going, well, yeah, we're talking about money. But I'm wondering about Sheila's relationship to what broadly we might call the water element or flow. So I wonder, Sheila, what it might be like for you to say something or connect with this idea that, Sheila, you get to flow with and without money. There's something about your nature, or what it means about how you move through life, or I don't know what it means, your creative life, or that you flow, you are flow, and that also you're dried up. That's a very direct way of working. So I think people listening to this podcast can see with the very same short question, on one level, we're talking about universal existential terror. In a middle level, it's like, well, what are you worried about if it dried up? What would it mean? What would it make you? We do more digging around. And you can sometimes do very powerful work just by noticing the particular phrases someone uses to describe their money situation, which you might use very different words. So, Sheila, consider saying, really feeling, I am flow, or I am in flow, whatever my money, with clients, without clients, with money, without money. The flow is in me. Just notice if that gives, it's humans who flow, right? Whatever that means to you, Sheila, I'd love to know. And then consider, and I imagine the second one will be harder for you because in your story, you don't want the money to dry up. What happens if you say, I'm dry or I'm dried up? And it's okay. I don't know Sheila at all. I don't know her age, her work. Maybe there's something about getting older. We get dry or desiccated, or I literally don't know. And this might sound preposterous to people. If you're listening to this podcast for the first time, well done for still listening. But consider that humans, we get to flow and we get to be dry. We get to be kind of fluid and we get to be brittle. And they can all be very useful qualities. Sheila, I hope that's helpful or at least intriguing. And I would love to know if you have a response, and if we can help you further, then just email us your response to whatever we've said and we'll see where we can go. Thank you for your question.
All right, that's a good few questions that we managed to get through. We've still got some more, so I feel that there is a listeners' questions part 2 on its way to you, maybe next week. So shall we end for today, Tim, and thank the listeners for their questions, and anything you want to sort of wrap up with before we end?
No, other than really, really genuine thanks to people for emailing. You and I love talking to each other, but we really love sharing this with people and responding. So please don't be shy. If you're listening, if you're finding this interesting, provoking, intriguing, let us know, ask questions, suggest things we could talk about. It really inspires Shaba and I when people are in touch, and it gives us ideas about what would be useful to talk about. So yeah, please be in touch, and thank you. And we'll do a part 2 questions next week.